Okay, so this is the very first section of this course. In this section, I'm going to start by teaching you the very basics of C#. One of the questions that a lot of beginners ask is, what is the difference between C# and .NET? So that's the first thing I'm going to answer here. Next, I'm going to talk about CLR, or Common Language Runtime, which is the runtime environment for .NET applications. Next, I'm going to talk about the architecture of .NET applications. And as part of this, I'm going to introduce you to concepts such as classes, namespaces, and assemblies. And finally, I will show you all these concepts in action. I'm going to introduce you to the very basics of Visual Studio and write a very simple C# application so you can see classes, namespaces, and methods in action. I hope you enjoyed this section, and let's get started. Okay, before we understand what CLR is and why we need it, let me explain a little bit about the history of C#. Before C#, we had two languages in the C family, the C language and C++. With either of these languages, when we compiled our application, the compiler translated our code into the native code for the machine on which it was running. Which means if I wrote an application in C++ on a Windows machine with AT86 processor architecture, the compiler would translate my code into the native code for that machine. That is a Windows machine with an AT86 processor. Now we have different hardwares and we have different operating systems. So if I took an application that compiled the application on the computer with a different architecture, that would not run. So when Microsoft was designing the C# language and the .NET framework, they came up with an idea that they borrowed from the Java community. In Java, when you compile your code, it's not translated directly into the machine code. It's translated into an intermediate language called bytecode. And we have the exact same concept in C#. So when you compile your C# code, the result is what we call IL, or intermediate language code. It's independent of the computer on which it's running. Now, we need something that would translate that IL code into the native code for the machine that is running the application. And that is the job of CLR, or Common Language Runtime. So CLR is essentially an application that is sitting in the memory whose job is to translate the IL code into the machine code. And this process is called just-in-time compilation, or JIT. So with this architecture, you can write an application in C# and you don't have to worry about compiling that into the native code for different machines. As long as a machine has CLR, that can run your application.